Have you ever reached a point in life where you silently asked yourself, why does love feel so heavy now? You're not alone. Imagine this. You've worked hard your entire life, raised kids, paid off a mortgage, maybe even survived a few health scares. You finally reach retirement, thinking this is your time to rest, breathe, and enjoy some well-earned peace. But instead of calm mornings and quiet evenings, you find yourself constantly adjusting, compromising, or even feeling trapped by the very relationship that once brought you joy. Sounds familiar? While the world tells us that having a partner in our golden years is the ultimate comfort, the truth is far more complex. For many seniors, what begins as love and companionship slowly shifts into emotional exhaustion, unwanted responsibility, or a sense of invisible sacrifice. The kind no one talks about at Sunday brunch. Have you ever noticed how some older folks seem to glow with freedom, traveling solo, making spontaneous decisions, sleeping in as long as they want, while others look weary, emotionally drained, or like they're always tiptoeing around someone else's needs? This isn't about blaming your partner. It's not even about giving up on love. This is about finally telling the truth, a truth that society often ignores, that sometimes relationships in later life cost more than they give. In today's episode of Senior Wisdom, we're digging deep into 5 emotional truths that every senior needs to hear. These aren't theories from a psychology book or recycled advice from a talk show. These are real experiences, real frustrations, and real awakenings from people just like you. Men and women in their 60s, 70s, and beyond who've discovered that peace of mind might be more valuable than constant compromise. We're not here to tell you to leave anyone. We're here to help you see clearly, maybe for the first time in decades. Because your later years should not be about maintaining appearances, avoiding conflict, or silently carrying burdens out of habit or fear of loneliness. They should be about freedom to choose, to rest, to be yourself without explanation. So if you've ever asked yourself, why do I feel more tired now than ever? Why do I miss having time just for me? Or even, is it okay to want space even in love? Then keep watching. Because what we're about to explore might just shift the way you see relationships, and more importantly, the way you choose to live in your most precious years. 1. The hidden toll of constant compromise. Let's be honest, when we're young, compromise is a skill. It's part of learning to love, grow, and build a life with someone. But when you reach your 60s, 70s, or even 80s, compromise can quietly become a weight you didn't sign up for. And the strange part? It rarely starts with anything big. It's the little things. What to eat for dinner, what to watch on TV, whether the thermostat should be at 70 degrees or 75 degrees. At first, these are just everyday decisions. But over time, they start to feel less like choices and more like negotiations. And eventually they chip away at something precious, your peace of mind. Let me tell you about Robert, a kind, soft-spoken man from Arizona. He's 74 now. For most of his life, he considered himself a good husband, supportive, loyal, the kind of man who put his wife's comfort ahead of his own without thinking twice. But recently, Robert made a quiet confession over coffee with a friend. All I want now is a peaceful morning. Just me, my cup of coffee, and silence. But the TV is already blaring before I even finish my first sip. Seems small, doesn't it? But that's how compromise works in old age. It doesn't come crashing down. It builds slowly, like drops of water wearing away at stone. One day it's skipping your favorite show because they hate it. Another day it's avoiding your favorite restaurant because they don't like the food. And before you realize it, you've lost track of what you like altogether. You start saying, it's not a big deal. But those small sacrifices pile up until one day you don't even recognize your routine anymore. As we get older, our patience changes, not because we're selfish, but because our emotional reserves run lower. We're not here to train or adjust anymore. We've already done that for decades. You deserve mornings that don't begin with noise you didn't choose. You deserve afternoons where no one questions why, you just want to sit quietly by the window. And you deserve evenings that end without having to explain or justify why you're tired. But when you're in a long-term relationship, even the smallest personal preferences become part of a shared decision system. And here's the painful truth. Even in loving marriages, one partner often becomes the adjuster. They're the one who yields more, gives more, bends more, and loses themselves in the process. Robert didn't realize how much of himself he had given away until he tried to recall the last time he chose something purely for his own joy. He paused, he looked down at his hands, and he quietly said, "I think it's been over 20 years since I had a full morning to myself just the way I wanted it." And that is the toll of constant compromise. We don't talk about this enough. So many older adults suffer silently, afraid that speaking up sounds ungrateful or selfish. But let's be clear, honoring your own needs isn't selfish, it's survival. At this stage of life, you've earned the right to protect your peace. Not every disagreement needs a compromise. Not every routine needs to be shared. It's okay to want space. It's okay to crave quiet. It's okay to say, "I just want to do things my way now." Because sometimes the real weight isn't in the argument. It's in the years of quiet surrender. The meals you didn't enjoy, the movies you watched just to keep someone else happy, the hobbies you dropped because they didn't approve. And the older you get, the heavier that invisible load becomes. So if you're watching this and thinking, "That's me," know this, you're not alone, and you don't have to keep carrying the emotional debt of constant compromise. Sometimes choosing yourself is the most loving thing you can do, for both of you, too. Losing the freedom you have earned. You spent decades waking up to an alarm clock, not because you wanted to, but because life demanded it. You raised children, managed homes, showed up to jobs no matter how tired you felt. You made sacrifices. You followed schedules. You compromised your own desires for the good of others. So now, after all of that, shouldn't this chapter finally belong to you? For many seniors, retirement is supposed to be the finish line where peace begins. The freedom to do whatever you want, whenever you want. No more checking in, no more rushing, no more justifying your choices to anyone. But for some, that freedom never fully arrives because even in later years, they're still adjusting to someone else's rhythm, habits, and preferences. Even in their golden years, they're still living their life according to someone else's needs. Let me introduce you to Frank, a 78-year-old widower from Missouri. For over 50 years, he was a devoted husband. He and his wife had what most would call a good marriage. No scandals, no public fights, just decades of steady companionship. But after his wife passed away from a long illness, Frank experienced something he didn't expect. Freedom. Not freedom from love, but freedom from the routine of always having to adapt. One morning he woke up at 9:30 a.m. No one asked why he slept in. No one reminded him to fix the coffee a certain way. No one was waiting for him to adjust his plans. And that morning, Frank sat by the window, watched the sun pour over his porch, and whispered, "I never knew what it felt like to wake up just for me." That's what we're talking about here. Independence isn't always about being alone. It's about being free. Free to eat what you want without worrying if your partner likes it. Free to take a walk at your pace, not someone else's. Free to read a book all day or do absolutely nothing without having to answer to anyone. But in many long-term relationships, that kind of independence slowly disappears. So quietly you may not even notice it's gone. You get used to asking, "Do you mind if You check in before every trip, every purchase, every plan. And over time, you stop doing things simply because you want to. Instead, you start waiting for mutual agreement, and with it, your autonomy fades. It doesn't happen out of malice, it happens out of habit. But here's something most people won't tell you. You are allowed to live for yourself now. You don't need permission to rearrange your furniture, to cancel dinner plans, or to spend your weekend bird watching if that's what brings you joy. You've earned the right to be a little selfish. Not in a cruel way, but in a restorative way. Many older adults don't realize just how much their lives are still dictated by someone else's preferences until that person is no longer around. And when they finally get that space, that breathing room, that stillness, they realize just how much of themselves had been on hold. This isn't about disliking your partner. It's not about choosing loneliness. It's about recognizing the invisible cost of always coordinating, adjusting, and compromising. You might not even remember what your unfiltered voice sounds like, but when you do hear it again, it's like a gentle homecoming. Oh, there I am. Independence in later life is a treasure, and sometimes you don't know you've lost it until it returns. So if you're watching this and feeling a tug in your heart, that little ache that says, I miss doing things just for me, listen to it. You deserve mornings that are yours, days that unfold at your pace, choices that don't require negotiation. Because after all the decades of giving to others, this chapter, it should be the one where you finally come first. 3. The emotional exhaustion you didn't expect. No one tells you how tired love can make you. Not the warm, affectionate kind of love, but the kind that over time begins to wear on your spirit because it always seems to ask just a little bit more from you. And here's the truth many older adults quietly carry in their hearts. Even in the most loving relationships, the constant need to adjust, reassure, and accommodate can leave you emotionally drained. You might not even realize it's happening. It sneaks up on you through everyday moments that seem harmless on the surface, like choosing dinner, or deciding when to turn off the lights, or trying to avoid a disagreement about something as small as how to fold the laundry. Let's revisit Robert, the 74-year-old we mentioned earlier. After his wife passed, people assumed he would be lonely. They expected him to spiral into grief, to spend his days in silence and sorrow. But when a neighbor asked how he was adjusting to life alone, Robert said something that surprised even himself. I miss her, of course, but I didn't realize how tired I was. Not from caregiving, not from the routine, from always adjusting, always making room for someone else's preferences before my own. And for the first time in decades, he didn't have to ask, what would she want for dinner? Will this upset her if I say it out loud? Should I wait to turn on the TV until she's done reading? There were no filters, no internal negotiations, no quiet emotional math, just peace. That's what emotional exhaustion in a relationship feels like. Not sadness, not anger, just a deep, quiet fatigue that slowly builds over time. You might still smile, you might still laugh, you might still care deeply for your partner. But inside, you're running on empty, and you don't even know it until one day you finally sit still and feel the weight of all the years you spent holding back your needs, your preferences, your voice. We're not taught to recognize this kind of tiredness because society tells us that if we're in a relationship, we should feel lucky, that growing old with someone is a blessing. And yes, sometimes it is, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's a daily negotiation that chips away at your identity. Sometimes it's the quiet pressure to keep the peace, to avoid friction, to smooth over every bump in the road. And sometimes, even when no one is fighting, you still feel like you're carrying more emotional weight than you can bear. It's not about blame. It's not about saying your partner is too much. It's about finally seeing the truth. You are allowed to feel tired of always bending. And more importantly, you are allowed to stop. Because here's the gift of later life. You no longer have to explain every choice. You don't have to make excuses for needing space, silence, or stillness. You have already given so much to family, to work, to relationships. Now you deserve a chapter that doesn't drain you, but fills you. So if you're watching this and silently nodding, if you've been feeling more tired lately, but can't quite put your finger on why. Take a moment, breathe, listen to that inner voice. It might be telling you that you're ready for more quiet, more simplicity, more time where you don't have to compromise just to keep the peace. And that's okay, because love shouldn't always feel like labor. And in your golden years, the most nourishing relationship might just be the one you have with yourself. The caretaking role that slowly consumes you. They say love means being there, in sickness and in health. And for many older adults, that promise isn't just romantic, it's sacred. But what no one really talks about is what happens when that love quietly takes over your life. When caring for someone you love turns from a gesture of devotion into a daily sacrifice that slowly chips away at your own strength, your own health, your own joy. This is the part of aging no one prepares you for. Let me tell you about James, a 77-year-old retired firefighter from Ohio. For over 5 decades, he and his wife built a life together. They were partners, best friends, and each other's rock through it all. But when she was diagnosed with early onset dementia, James did what any loving husband would do. He stepped in. At first, it was manageable, setting reminders for medications, helping her get dressed, making appointments. But as the months stretched into years, the woman he loved began to fade, and the responsibilities piled up. He was suddenly her nurse, her chauffeur, her protector, her entire world. And slowly, he disappeared. James stopped going to his morning coffee group. He lost nearly 20 pounds without noticing. He couldn't remember the last time he had slept through the night without being startled awake by her wandering or confusion. And one afternoon, during a doctor's appointment meant for her, his blood pressure was so high they almost sent him to the ER. That was the moment he realized, I've been so busy keeping her alive, I forgot I'm still a person too. This isn't rare. In fact, it's alarmingly common. Studies from the CDC and National Alliance for Caregiving show that elderly caregivers face significantly higher rates of depression, anxiety, and even serious illness. Why? Because the body can only take so much, and the soul, even less. Caring for a loved one can feel noble, even beautiful. But that doesn't make it easy, and that certainly doesn't mean it won't take a toll on the very person doing the caring. So many older adults are silently burning out because they feel guilty even admitting they're exhausted. But here's the truth. There is nothing selfish about protecting your own health. You can love someone deeply and still feel overwhelmed. You can show up day after day and still feel like you're losing yourself. We have to start talking about the invisible cost of long-term caregiving, especially for seniors. Because when you give every ounce of your energy, your time, and your body to someone else's needs, there's often nothing left for you. And by the time the caregiving ends, whether through recovery or loss, you may find that you are the one who needs healing. Some people say that's what love is. But love should lift you, not consume you. Yes, we take care of each other. Yes, we honor our commitments. But there must be room for your own well-being too. That means asking for help. That means taking breaks without guilt. That means recognizing the signs of burnout before your body forces you to. Because here's the hardest truth of all. If you lose yourself entirely in the act of caring for someone else, they're not the only one at risk. So if you're watching this and you've been nodding through tears, if you've skipped your own doctor's appointment because your spouse had one, if you've told yourself, I'll rest later, but later never comes, please hear this. You matter too. Your health, your peace, your rest, they are not luxuries. They are necessities. And the most loving thing you can do, not just for your partner, but for yourself, is to make sure you don't disappear in the process of helping someone else survive. The financial and emotional strain few discuss. At first, it feels like a second chance. A new relationship in your 70s or 80s can seem like the beginning of something beautiful. Companionship, laughter, even a little romance. After years of routine and maybe even loss, it feels good to have someone to share dinner with again, to hold hands during an evening walk, to feel seen. But here's the part no one talks about. That fresh start can come with a price tag. Let's go back to Robert, now 80 years old. Years after his wife passed, Robert met a kind woman at his local community center. They bonded over music, shared stories about their grandchildren, and enjoyed each other's company. It felt easy until it wasn't. A few months into the relationship, she asked if he could help cover her grocery bill one week. Of course, Robert said yes. Then it was a utility bill, then some unexpected dental work. And before long, he was paying for part of her rent and occasionally helping one of her adult children who had fallen on hard times. I didn't mind helping, Robert said, but suddenly I was dipping into my savings, and I didn't even notice how fast it was happening. What started as companionship became a financial obligation, and with it came emotional pressure, fear of saying no, fear of disappointing her, fear of appearing selfish. This story is more common than you think. Many older adults enter new relationships with open hearts, but without clear financial boundaries. And because we're taught to be generous, especially with people we care about, it's easy to start giving and forget to protect ourselves. But here's the hard truth. Your financial security in later life is fragile. You don't have time to rebuild a savings account. You don't have the luxury of taking big risks or weathering bad investments. Every dollar you've saved, it matters now more than ever for your peace of mind, your health care, and your independence. The emotional toll is just as real. It starts with money, but soon you might find yourself caught in situations you never expected. Arguments over spending, guilt over saying no, resentment you don't speak about because you don't want to seem unkind, worrying about someone else's financial mess when all you wanted was company. And then there's the fear of being trapped, not by love, but by dependence. Some seniors stay in uncomfortable relationships because they're too financially entangled to walk away. Or worse, they're afraid they'll be alone if they set boundaries. But here's what many forget. Staying single doesn't mean staying lonely. In fact, many older adults who choose to live independently report feeling more in control, more peaceful, and more financially secure. They make their own decisions. They spend without guilt. They enjoy their freedom because they know every dollar they save is going toward their well-being, not someone else's emergency. And most importantly, they don't carry the emotional weight of someone else's financial instability. Of course, not all relationships are draining or demanding, but every relationship in later life should come with a